Can you feel the weight of a single moment, when the world shifts on the axis of one wrong choice? Picture Savannah, Georgia, bathed in the soft, humid glow of a late afternoon, where jasmine sent the air and the sea breeze whisper through ancient oak. Cobblestone street shimmer under the golden sun, casting long, lazy shadow that dance with the city's slow, elegant rhythm.
It's the kind of day that begs for pause, tourists snapping photos, locals lingering over sweet tea on shaded porches. But for David Langston, a federal prosecutor, this day would become a battleground, a clash of prejudice and power that would shake the very foundations of justice. Oh, you won't see the twist coming, but when it hits, it'll leave you reeling. David steps out of his sleek Tesla Model S, adjusting the cuffs of his charcoal gray suit, his reflection in the glossy exterior revealing a man in his late 40s, tall, poised, with close-cropped hair and movements as deliberate as a chess master. His briefcase clicks softly as he retrieves it, a familiar ritual before facing the Savannah Federal Court, its neoclassical columns looming like indifferent sentinels. He's argued countless cases here, but today feels different, doesn't it? A subtle unease twists in his gut, a silent warning he brushes aside.
No time for premonition, not when a high-stakes case away.
His phone buzzes, and a text from Angela, his wife of 18 years, lights up the screen. Alicia says, "Good luck."
She made you a good luck charm out of yarn. Left it in your briefcase.
A smile breaks through his focus. Their daughter, Alicia, has a gift for weaving joy into his toughest days, doesn't she? As David strides toward the courthouse, his fingers graze the yarn loop in his briefcase's front pocket, twisted, imperfect, but brimming with love. Across the street, a black and white patrol car lurks, its engine idling like a predator biding its time. Inside, Officer Jason Rohr, mid-30s with a jaw like a meat cleaver and a chip on his shoulder, scans the block, his eyes narrowing as they land on David. His partner, Officer Eli Matz, older and wearier, slumps beside him, worn out from chasing shadows.
RORS pulse kickant. Why?
A vague bolo crackled over the radio earlier. Black male, 40s, dark clothes, suspected in downtown burglaries. No clear ID, just a hazy description. But for Rohr, that's enough, isn't it? He's got a history of letting vague justify action. And David's Tesla, his tailored suit, his confident stride, they don't register as they should. All Rohr sees is skin. See that guy?
ROR muter, tapping the window.
Matt sighs, following his gaze. Yes, so? Matches the bolo, height, age, build.
Fancy read.
That's half the attorneys in this town, Matz grumbles, but Rohr's already moving, stepping out of the car, adjusting his belt with a predator swagger. I'm going to check it out, he says, ignoring Matt's half-hearted objection. Can you sense the tension building, the moment teetering on the edge of disaster? David doesn't notice until Rohr's voice cuts through the air like a whip. Sir, step away from the vehicle now. David turns, startled, his brows knitting as he registers the commanding tone. Not a question but an order. I'm sorry, he says, standing still, his voice calm but laced with confusion. Hands where I can see them. Rohr barks, his hand hovering near his holster.
David's confusion sharpant. What is happening here?
Officer, is there a problem? He asks, his tone steady, professional.
You match the description of a suspect. Step away from the vehicle.
Matz is out of the car now, moving slower, his eyes flicking to the courthouse, where a few pedestrians pause, sensing trouble. They're in full view of the building's grand steps, yet Rohr's undeterred. David holds his ground. Suspect in what exactly? He asks, his voice measured but firm. I said, step away. Rohr snaps, his patience thinning. I'm a federal prosecutor, David says, clear and deliberate. I'm on my way into court. But Rohr's already reaching for his cuffs, his mind made up. Then you won't mind answering a few questions.
Turn around. Place your arm behind your back.
I don't think you understand, David begins, but Rohr cuts him off. I understand just fine. In seconds, the cold steel of handcuffs bites into David's wrists, the click echoing like a gunshot in his ears. His briefcase hits the pavement with a sickening thud, and oh, the yarn loop Alicia made slips out, landing softly on the sidewalk, a tiny piece of love crushed under the weight of this injustice. Matz shifts nervously, his eyes darting between the growing crowd and Rohr's rigid stance. David stands tall, his hands bound, his gaze locking onto Rohr's. You're making a mistake, he says, his voice steady, unyielding. "We'll see," Roar mutters, shoving him toward the squad car. Can you feel the outrage, the disbelief, as a man's dignity is stripped away in broad daylight? Inside the courthouse, Judge Naomi Breener glances out her window, her brows furrowing at the commotion. Does she recognize the man being forced into the patrol car? Outside, phones are out, cameras rolling, capturing every second of this travesty.
A young woman's voice cut through the murmure. What the hell?
That guy was in a suit. What did he do blink wrong? The buzz grows, a low hum of anger and confusion. Another incident, another assumption, another story about to break wide open. Inside the patrol car, David sits still, his breathing slow, deliberate. No panic, no shouting, just a mind honed by years in courtrooms, already dissecting the case he's now living. He stares straight ahead as the car pulls away, his heart pounding but his resolve unbreakable. He knows this isn't just a mistake, it's the opening argument in a fight far bigger than any brief he's ever written. Can you imagine the weight of that realization, the fire it ignites in a man who's spent his life upholding justice? The squad car crawls down East Liberty Street, weaving through traffic with no urgency, as if this were just another day. David sits upright, the cuffs digging into his wrists, the rough seat jabbing his shoulder blades. He flexes his fingers, testing the metal's grip, not to resist, but to remind himself he's still in control, at least of his own mind. Officer Roar keeps glancing in the rearview mirror, his eyes glinting with challenge. "You're quiet," he says, as if silence is a confession.
David de Snetebit.
"I've seen a lot of guys like you," Roar goads, thinking a fancy car and a nice suit makes you untouchable. David finally meets his gaze in the mirror, his voice calm but razor-sharp. "No, but the Constitution is supposed to mean something." "Oh, how that truth stings, doesn't it?" Roar scoffs, his grip tightening on the wheel, while Matt shifts uncomfortably, his silence louder than words. He hasn't touched David, hasn't spoken much, but the lines around his eyes betray his unease. He knows this is wrong, doesn't he? But silence is easier, less paperwork, less trouble. "You going to tell me who you really are?" Roar presses, his tone mocking. "Because that federal prosecutor line didn't get you out of cuffs, did it?" David's response is steady, almost prophetic. "It wasn't meant to, but you're going to wish it had." Roar's laugh is hollow, a crack in his bravado, as if he senses the storm he's unleashed. They pull into the courthouse's sallyport, the very building David was headed to. Oh, the bitter irony. He glimpses the federal seal on the wall, a symbol of justice that's seen murder trials, cartel busts, and now this, a black man in cuffs for fitting a description so vague it could ensnare 1,000 others. It's a cruel poetry, isn't it? Let's go.
ROR snaps, yanking the door open.
David steps out slowly, his shoulders squared, not in defiance but in defense of his dignity, refusing to let them strip it away completely. Inside, two federal marshals at the security checkpoint pause their chat, their eyes widening as Roar leads David toward the elevators. One, a young Latino officer named Torres, raises an eyebrow. Jason, you know who that is?" "Yeah," Roar says, brushing past, someone impersonating a federal employee. Torres opens his mouth to protest, but the elevator doors close, swallowing them in silence. Roar's breathing hard now, not from effort, but from the thrill of control. Does he even realize he's unraveling his own world? On the third floor, they're met by Elaine, a clerk in her late 50s with a jaw like a guillotine and eyes that miss nothing. She blinks, stunned. "Mr. Langston?" she asks, her voice sharp with disbelief. Before Roar can speak, David cuts in, calm but commanding. "Yes. Can you please call Judge Breener in the U.S. Attorney's office?" Roar steps forward, bristling. "Ma'am, this man is being detained." Elaine raises a hand, her authority absolute. "Officer, I suggest you stop talking before this becomes something you can't walk back." David turns to Matt, his gaze piercing.
"You've been killed this time."
"Anything you'd like to add?" Matt swallows, his mouth twitching, but all he manages is a weak, "We were following the bolo." Elaine glares at them like naughty schoolboys, then grabs the phone. "Yes, this is Elaine at third floor intake. I need Judge Breener immediately. Tell her it's about David Langston, and it's urgent." Roar starts to argue, but David's mind is already elsewhere, cataloging every detail, every word, every witness, every violation, building a case as airtight as the cuffs still biting his wrists. Can you feel the shift, the moment justice begins to turn? Heavy footsteps echo down the hall, and the door to Judge Breener's chambers flies open. There she stands, a commanding figure in her dark robe, flanked by 2 assistants, her eyes blazing with fury. She stops short, seeing David, then the cuffs. "Take them off now," she orders Roar, her voice a thunderclap. Roar hesitates, stunned. "I said now, officer," she repeats, each word a bullet. Reluctantly, he uncuffs David. The metals release a sharp, decisive sound. Mats looks away, shame creeping into his posture. David rubs his wrists, his dignity intact. "Thank you, Judge," he says, his voice steady. "I thought you were in court by now," she says, her fury barely contained. "I was on my way." She turns to Roar, her gaze like ice. On what grounds was this man detained? He matched the bolo, black male 40s, driving an expensive vehicle near recent burglaries. Roar says, standing his ground. "That's it." Breener's tone could freeze fire. It was enough to stop him. "Was it enough to cuff him?" she snaps. "I followed procedure." "No," she says, her voice cutting through the air. "You followed your prejudice." Can you hear the truth in her words, the reckoning beginning to unfold? Can you feel the electric tension in that courthouse hallway, where the air itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for justice to speak? Officer Eli Matt steps forward, his voice trembling, barely audible. "Ma'am, he begins, but Judge Naomi Breener cuts him off like a blade through silk. "You too," she snaps, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. "You stood there and said nothing."
Don't act noble now.
The hallway falls silent, so still that even the old building seems to lean in, listening, judging. No one dares move, the weight of her words pinning them in place. Breener turns to Elaine, her clerk, her voice sharp and commanding. "Get the U.S. Marshal Service. I want a full record of this incident, every internal communication, and the security footage from the front entrance, now." Then her gaze softens, just a fraction, as she faces David Langston, the man at the center of this storm. "Would you like to press charges?" she asks, her tone steady but expectant. David pauses, and can you imagine the storm raging in his heart? The hallway waits, every eye on him, every breath held. He looks at Officer Jason Roar, the man who cuffed him, who saw only his skin and not his truth. "Not yet," David says, his voice calm but resolute, a quiet thunder promising more to come. "But I'd like to speak on the record in this courthouse today." Breener nods, her eyes glinting with respect. "You'll have it," she declares. And with that, David Langston turns, not as a man shamed, but as a warrior ready to rewrite the narrative, to seize the stage and demand the world listen. Can you feel the shift, the moment a victim becomes a victor?
The courtroom buzz like a hornet's nest, alive with whisper and anticipation.
Word of David's arrest has spread like wildfire, crackling through security radios, lighting up phone screens across Savannah. What began as a murmur in the hallway now roars. A federal prosecutor, David Langston, dragged in cuffs by a local cop who thought he fit the description. By the time Judge Breener reconvenes, the gallery is swelling, law clerks huddling behind file folders, whispering secrets, junior attorneys leaning in, trying to hide their curiosity, and even senior DOJ officials slipping into the back row, their faces grim. They're not here for a trial, are they? They're here for a reckoning, a moment that will echo far beyond these walls. David sits at the defense table, not his usual place, not where a prosecutor belongs. He adjusts his tie, smooths his lapel, each movement a quiet act of reclaiming his dignity, stolen just hours ago. No briefcase rests beside him now, just the weight of silence, the pressure of countless eyes, and attention sharper than any legal blade. Across the aisle, Officer Roar stands defiant, arms folded, jaw tight, his expression not of regret but of stubborn pride. Beside him, Officer Matt slouches, pale and restless, shifting his weight as if the carpet beneath him burns. Can you see the guilt in his eyes, the shame he can't shake? Judge Breener sweeps in through the side door, her robes billowing like storm clouds, her presence commanding silence. She wastes no time, her voice steady, laced with steel. "This session is held on the record at the request of Mr. David Langston, Assistant United States Attorney for the Southern District of Georgia," she declares. "This is not a trial, but it may become one.
Monsieur Langston, you may speak.
The room holds its breath, the faint buzz of the microphone the only sound as David rises, slow and deliberate, his heart pounding but his resolve unshakable. He takes a breath, and when he speaks, it's not with anger but with a clarity that cuts like a diamond. Your Honor, earlier today, I was arrested without cause in full view of this courthouse by Officer Jason Rohr of the Savannah Police Department. He begins, his voice steady, resonant. I was not asked to identify myself, not informed of my rights. I was told I fit the description, a description so vague it could apply to hundreds of men in this city. His eyes scan the room, locking with those who dare meet his gaze, even Rohr's flickering for a moment under the weight of truth. I was cuffed, searched, escorted into a federal building like a common criminal. David continues, his words a controlled fire. And I remained calm. I didn't resist, didn't fight. Why? Because I knew if I didn't, I might not live long enough to explain myself. Oh, can you feel the razor-sharp pain in that truth, the chilling reality that survival demanded compliance?
The room réel, agape escaping someone in the gallery.
Rohr shifts, his fury barely contained, but he stays silent. David presses on, his voice unwavering. I've prosecuted gang leaders, corrupt bankers, predators hiding behind tax shelters and trust funds. In all that time, I never imagined I'd be mistaken for a suspect simply for existing, in the wrong place, in the wrong skin, wearing the wrong suit. Can you hear the heartbreak, the betrayal of a man who's dedicated his life to justice, only to be judged by his color? David turns slightly, his gaze piercing Rohr. You didn't see a prosecutor, Officer Rohr. You saw a profile, a black man near a luxury vehicle. That's all it took. Breener interjects gently, her voice a steady anchor. Mr. Langston, I'll allow this line of argument for now. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm nearly finished, David replies, his tone resolute. He faces the courtroom again, his words heavy with purpose. This isn't just about me. It's about every person presumed guilty before they speak, who's had to lower their voice, raise their hands, pray someone sees them as human. He pauses, the weight of generations resting on his shoulders, then adds softly, if I didn't have a badge in my wallet, I wouldn't be standing here. I'd be in a holding cell, or worse. The silence that follows is electric, loaded with the unspoken truths of countless others. Can you feel the room trembling with the power of his words? Judge Breener leans forward, her voice measured but firm. Thank you, Mr. Langston. Your words are noted for the record. Officer Rohr, do you wish to respond? Rohr steps forward, his voice flat, defensive. I was following procedure, Your Honor. The suspect's description matched the defendant. David raises an eyebrow, his voice cutting. The defendant? Rohr stumbles, caught off guard. I meant Mr. Langston. Breener's eyes narrow.
The description. State it, please.
Rohr glances at his notes, his confidence waning. Black male, 40s, dark clothing, seen leaving the vicinity of recent break-ins in the downtown area. That's it. David asks, his tone sharp with disbelief. No height, no vehicle make, no identifying marks. Rohr hesitates, his bravado cracking. That was all the dispatch gave. Breener nods slowly, her voice cold. And yet you felt confident enough to arrest a man in front of the federal courthouse without even asking his name. Rohr doubles down, defiant. I acted on instinct. David's response is quiet but devastating. Instinct isn't a defense when instinct is bias in a uniform. Oh, how that truth lands, a blow to the heart of the system. Matz clears his throat, his voice barely above a whisper. Your Honor, I recognized Mr. Langston, but he stops, shame choking his words. You what? David asks, his tone soft but piercing.
Matt Swalloward.
I didn't say anything. I should have. I didn't think it would go that far. Breener's gaze pins him like a specimen under glass.
And yet, here we are.
David sits, his heart racing, but his hand steady, his mind already strategizing the next move. Breener surveys them all, her eyes narrowing.
Let this moment be clear.
This courtroom is not a place for assumptions, it's a place for facts, and today, the facts are ugly. Mr. Langston, you have every right to file formal charges. But for now, we are adjourned. Her gavel slams down, sharp and final, a sound that echoes like a promise of justice to come. As the room empties, no one chatters, no one scrolls, they stare. Some look at David with awe, others at roar with disgust, and some quietly at themselves, wrestling with their own complicity. David remains seated, unmoving, his silence not defeat but strategy, a man who's been humiliated but now holds the stage. What will he do next? Oh, it's going to change everything. That night, David doesn't sleep, does he? He sits at his kitchen table long past midnight, a half-finished cup of black coffee cooling beside his phone, the room dark save for the faint glow of under-cabinet lights and a street lamp outside. Savannah slumbers, but inside David's chest, a storm rages, refusing to settle. He's faced prosecutors, defense attorneys, criminals, and corrupt officials, but nothing prepared him for the sting of being paraded like a suspect in the very courthouse he upholds. It's not just the humiliation, is it? It's the brutal truth. His title, his years of service, meant nothing in that moment when his skin was all they saw. Across from him, Angela stirs, still in her scrubs from a grueling double shift, her eyes tired but sharp, tracking him with the intuition of 18 years together. "You didn't deserve that," she says softly, her voice a balm to his wounded spirit. David stares at his hands, his voice low, heavy. "I know. But it's not just about what happened to you," she presses, leaning closer. "It's what it means to everyone watching." "I'm not trying to be a symbol and," he says, frustration creeping in. "I just wanted to walk into work." Angela's gaze holds him, unwavering. "That's exactly why you have to speak up." A long silence stretches between them, thick with unspoken truths. David nods. Just once, but it's enough, a quiet vow to fight on. By morning, the videos are everywhere, aren't they? Dozens of angles, cell phones, security footage, news commentary, spreading like wildfire. Cable news anchors dissect the arrest, conservative pundits claiming Rohr was just doing his job, progressives demanding his badge. But one clip changes everything, a live stream by a law clerk named Jada, capturing the moment David's cuffs are removed before Judge Breener, racking up nearly 3 million views. Her caption is a gut punch: "They arrested a federal prosecutor because he was black in a suit." Can you feel the outrage rippling across the nation? Then comes the call, U.S. Attorney Lyle Jackson, David's boss, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You okay?" he asks, no small talk. "I'm fine," David says, but Lyle's not buying it. "You don't sound fine." David lets out a small weary laugh.
How should he sound?
A pause, then Lyle's voice softens. "I need you to come in today."
We are holding a press conference.
"You can speak if you want, no pressure."
You don't owe onion anything. David hésitate. Isatevi.
"Then I'm not doing this for them," he says at last. "I'm doing it for Alicia. She needs to see her father stand up." Oh, can you imagine the love, the duty driving that decision? That afternoon, the DOJ press room is a madhouse, reporters jostling, photographers crowding folding tables, the air thick with anticipation. David steps to the podium, wearing the same suit from yesterday, no tie, just his nameplate and his truth. He looks out at the sea of faces, then straight into the cameras, his voice steady, unyielding.
My name is David Langston.
I'm a federal prosecutor. For 20 years, I've fought for truth, due process, the dignity of the law. Yesterday, I was handcuffed without question, without probable cause, without even the courtesy of a conversation.
The room falls silent, every word landing like a stone.
I wasn't alone. I carried every black man who's had to explain his presence, every son told to watch how he speaks, every father who fears staying alive means staying silent. His voice sharpens, a blade of truth. This isn't about me. It's about what this country refuses to see. Justice isn't equal, appearance outweighs evidence, and black skin in a suit still reads as threat.
The silence is deafening, a collective holding of breath. David steps back, needing no applause, no handshake. Juste air, juste space to breathe.
But outside, behind the building, a ghost from the past waits.
David. A man calls, stepping forward.
David freezes, his heart skipping as he places the hunched shoulders, the nervous eyes.
Eli.
Officer Eli Matz nods, awkward in plain clothes, a folder tucked under his arm.
He didn't know if he should come. David S. Gaz ardent.
Then why did you? Matt swallows, his voice thick with shame. Because I owe you more than silence. The past floods back, law school, volunteer clinics, the day David defended a young Eli Matz against a petty theft charge, saving his record, setting him on the path to the police academy. Can you feel the weight of that history, the betrayal now laid bare? Can you feel the raw sting of betrayal in that quiet moment behind the DOJ building, where the air crackles with unspoken history? David Langston's voice is low, steady, but laced with pain as he faces Officer Eli Matz, the man he once saved from ruin.
You remembered me.
David says, his words heavy with disbelief. Matz nods, his eyes clouded with shame, unable to meet David's gaze. Then you knew who I was yesterday. David presses, his voice tightening, each word a wound. A beat passes, then another, the silence thick with guilt. Yes, Matz whispers, barely audible, I did.
David s'encurle into fist, is knuckle whitening as a truth it's like a punch.
And you still let him cuff me. Can you imagine the hurt, the fury of a man who helped Matz rebuild his life, only to be betrayed in the cruelest way? Matz, trembling, opens a folder and holds it out, his voice shaking. Inside are printed emails, internal memos, and something chilling, a pattern. Multiple reports against Officer Rohr for profiling black men under vague descriptions, all dismissed, all ignored. I started saving everything months ago.
Matt confesse, his words spilling out like a man burdening his soul.
I thought maybe I was imagining it, but then yesterday happened, and I realized I was part of the problem. David stares at the papers, then back at Matz, his eyes burning with resolve. This isn't forgiveness, he says flatly, his voice cold, unyielding. Matz meets his gaze, his own eyes pleading. I'm not asking for it.
I'm giving you a match, burn it down.
David takes the folder, his fingers tightening around it, and for the first time in 2 days, a smile crosses his face, not of joy, but of a man ready for war. Oh, can you feel the fire igniting in his heart, the promise of a reckoning? 3 days later, David stands before a federal review board, the hearing chamber humming with tension, its polished desks and suited officials a stark contrast to the raw truth he's about to unleash. The Department of Justice seal looms overhead, a watchful eye over a room packed with local law enforcement brass, DOJ observers, and civil rights advocates, all waiting for the man at the center to speak. David adjusts the microphone, places a single folder on the table, and takes a steady breath, his presence commanding, unyielding. This isn't about one officer anymore, is it? It's about a disease masquerading as a system, a rot he's determined to expose. I thank the board for convening this hearing, he begins, his voice clear, resonant. But let's be clear, I'm not here to tell a story. I'm here to expose a pattern. He opens the folder, his movements deliberate, each page a weapon. These are 7 complaints against Officer Jason Rohr over the last 4 years, each involving the unlawful stop and detention of black men. Each time the suspect fit the description. Each time, no charges were filed, every complaint dismissed, every one buried. He pauses, letting the words settle like a slow-burning fuse, the room crackling with unease. This is not coincidence, he declares, his voice rising with conviction. This is not poor training. This is cultural permission, and it must end. A murmur ripples through the audience, a wave of shock and recognition. David's eyes lock onto Chief Whitmore, the Savannah PD's head, seated near the front with a politician's smile and a bureaucrat's spine. Chief Whitmore, when's the last time Officer Rohr underwent training on racial bias or constitutional procedure? David asks, his tone sharp, demanding. Whitmore clears his throat, flustered. I'd have to check. I've already checked. David cuts in, flipping a page with precision. Not once in 5 years. In fact, your department axed implicit bias training from the 2021 budget. Care to explain why? Whitmore stammers, his composure crumbling. We redirected funds to tactical preparedness programs. David's response is flat, devastating. So you cut education and bought more guns. Got it. Can you feel the room shift, the truth exposing the system's priorities? A DOJ official scribbles furiously, while a younger officer in the back fidgets, discomfort etched on his face.
David presse son relentle, tournant un azur page.
I'm submitting a sworn statement from Officer Eli Matz, Rohr's partner, he announces. He confirms witnessing multiple unlawful stops, racial profiling incidents, and admits to staying silent. Whitmore mutters, "This is turning into a witch hunt." David's gaze snaps to him, unyielding. "With all due respect, Chief, if you're Department Salem, I'm not lighting the fire, you are." The room tenses, a cough breaking the silence as the weight of his words sinks in. Then David drops a bombshell no one expects. "I'm not pressing personal charges against Rohr yet," he says, his voice steady, purposeful. "I don't want a settlement, hush money, or headlines that fade in a week. I want reform, public, enforceable, permanent reform." Judge Naomi Breener, a neutral observer, raises an eyebrow, intrigued. "You have a specific proposal?" she asks. David nods, his resolve unshakable. "Yes." 3 demands. First, mandatory annual training on racial profiling, constitutional procedure, and de-escalation. Second, a civilian oversight board with subpoena power. Third, immediate suspension of any officer under investigation for misconduct, pending full review. The board murmurs, a younger official whispering to the chair, the room buzzing with the audacity of his vision. David sweeps his gaze across them all. "I'm not here to shame," he says, his voice a clarion call. "I'm here to rebuild. But if the system won't change, I'll take every camera, every court, every voice I can find, and make this city a national case study in how power responds to injustice." He stands, gathering his papers, his voice steady, unyielding. "You have a choice. Savannah can be a symbol of change, or a warning." Flashbulbs explode as he exits, reporters swarming the corridor, their questions a barrage. "Mr. Langston, are you suing the department?
Running for office?
Is Rohr under federal investigation?" David walks through the noise, silent, his purpose louder than their shouts. Can you see the fire in his steps, the man who's just shaken the system to its core? That evening, back home, Alicia curls up beside him on the couch, her head against his chest, her eyes wide with awe. "You really said all that to their faces?" she asks, her voice tinged with pride.
David no, a fin smile breaking through.
"I bet they were so mad." "They were scared," he says, his smile sharpening. "That's better." Angela calls from the kitchen, her voice warm but cautionary. "There's a difference between making change and making enemies, you know." David looks toward her, his gaze steady. "Sometimes they're the same people." Angela crosses the room, placing a steaming cup of tea before him, her hand squeezing his shoulder in silent support. The house falls quiet, but David's phone buzzes, a blocked number, no voicemail, just a chilling text. "You don't know what you've started.
Walk away before it gets worse."
He stares at the screen, his jaw tightening, then locks it without a word. They're watching, aren't they? But David Langston has no intention of backing down. A plain manila envelope arrives anonymously at his office late on a rainy Thursday. No return address, no signature, just his name in stark block letters. David Langston, personal.
The receptionist found it in the Dropbox. No courrier log, nothing.
David turns it over, the weight feeling off. Not junk but not legal documents either. In his office, under the hum of fluorescent lights, he locks the door and opens it, his heart pounding. Inside, 6 pages, emails, memos, a spreadsheet, and a scan badge that stops him cold. His eyes narrow as he reads the top page, an email thread between Savannah PD's Internal Affairs and the DA's office, dated 6 months ago, subject, ROR flag pattern suppression. The words hit like a slap. DA Faulner reviewed the footage.
Advise non pursuit.
Same as prior cases. He'll keep it off docket. No need to notify civilian complainants. David reads it twice, his jaw clenching. Can you feel the betrayal, the cover-up laid bare? The next page is a memo, internal use only, do not distribute, outlining an unofficial policy between SPD brass and the DA's office to manage optics on minority stops, coded language screaming complicity. Where resolution is impractical, prioritize internal mediation, avoid court escalation.
Translation, bury the truth.
The spreadsheet lists 32 names, all black men, stopped by Rohr under vague reasonable suspicion. Only 2 led to charges, both dropped, but the final column chills him, recommended action, over half say suppress and archive. The last page is a badge, not SPD but Chatham County DA's office, with a handwritten note in blue ink, ask Faulner about the special list. You're not the first, but you might be the last. David freezes, his mind racing. Faulkner, smooth, charming Gerald Faulkner, a man he's shared meals and small talk with, wasn't just complicit, he was the architect. Can you imagine the shock, the realization of such betrayal? That night, David meets Judge Breener in her private chambers. No press, no staff, just them, the air heavy with the weight of what he's uncovered. He lays the documents on her desk, one by one, each a piece of a damning puzzle. Her expression hardens as she reads, her voice low, grave. "This is conspiracy," she says. David nods. "And obstruction, possibly civil rights violations." "Definitely that," she agrees, her eyes meeting his. "Do you know what this could mean?" "I do," he says, resolute. "But I'm not going to the DOJ yet, not until it's airtight. I need proof this special list exists." Breener exhales, her voice cautious. "And how do you plan to get that?" David's answer is quiet, unyielding. "I'm going to ask the one who knows where it is." The next day, David stands outside District Attorney Gerald Faulkner's gated estate, a colonial mansion with white columns, trimmed hedges, and an American flag, a facade of justice. He's never been here, but he's seen it in campaign brochures, Faulkner posing as the law's guardian. Oh, how the truth burns now. David rings the bell, his heart steady but fierce. Faulkner answers, his smile wide, disarming.
David.
"Didn't know you made house calls." "I don't." David replies, his voice firm. "This isn't business as usual." Faulkner's smile falters, unease creeping in. "You look serious." "I am." They sit in the study, unread books lining the walls, an unopened bourbon decanter on the table. David hands him the top 2 pages, his gaze unflinching. Faulkner's face stays still, but his hand clenches the paper's edge. "Where did you get these?"
"They came to me."
David says, anonymously, but with purpose. Faulkner sets the pages down, his voice smooth, calculated. "You know, Langston, sometimes it's better to let these things die quietly. You're smart, respected, with a future, don't tie it to something you can't control."
"Der it is, the mask sleeping, the charmidin asret. David de Snte flanche.
You created a shadow policy.
Protected à profiler.
Buried the truth to save your image.
And now you want me to play along."
Faulkner's voice drops, a warning. "Push this, and you'll tear this city apart." David leans in, his eyes blazing. "Then maybe it needs to be torn."
Can you feel the défiance, the courage of a man ready to dismantle la corrupte système?
Can you feel the electric shock of truth in that quiet study, where the air grows thick with betrayal? A long silence stretches between David Langston and District Attorney Gerald Faulkner, the weight of their words hanging like a storm about to break. Then Faulkner drops a bombshell David never saw coming. "There is a list," he admits, his voice low, almost confessional. David blinks, stunned, his heart pounding. Did he hear that right? Faulkner nods, his eyes steady, unapologetic. "It's not on paper, not officially, but it exists, a running tally of people SPD flags as recurring subjects. They're not criminals, just types, certain neighborhoods, certain vehicles, certain last names. People like you." David's voice turns to ice, each word a shard of righteous anger. "That's profiling." Faulkner meets his gaze, unflinching. "That's politics." David's response is a blade, sharp and final. "Not anymore." He stands, his resolve a towering force, and walks out the front door, leaving it ajar, no need to slam it. The walls of Savannah's justice system are about to tremble, aren't they? The world explodes before sunrise, a tidal wave of truth crashing over David's life. He's barely slept an hour when alerts flood his phone, his laptop, the television, screaming headlines by 6:42 a.m., Savannah linked to secret watch list of black residents. Federal prosecutor refuses to back down. Can you imagine the chaos, the story blazing across MSNBC, CNN, even Fox News, though their skeptical spin? Prosecutor claims racial bias, but where's the proof? Tries to dim the fire. But the proof is undeniable, isn't it? David submitted it to DOJ oversight, the Inspector General, select members of Congress, each document a nail in the coffin of corruption. Judge Naomi Breener moves like lightning, requesting an emergency judicial review and securing federal witness protection for the anonymous whistleblower. Faulkner's office goes dark. No statements, no spin, just a silence that screams guilt louder than any confession. Can you hear it, that deafening quiet of a system caught in its own lies? By noon, David's front lawn is a circus, reporters wielding boom mics, news vans clogging the curb, drones buzzing like vultures with Wi-Fi. Angela pulls the blinds shut, shielding their home from the frenzy. Alicia, cross-legged on the couch, stares at the TV, her eyes wide, searching for her father's face. "Daddy," she gasps, "they're showing you." David steps behind her, his heart heavy as the screen flashes his press conference image, his hand mid-gesture, his expression fierce, then cuts to Faulkner's front door, then a side-by-side with Officer Jason Rohr's mugshot.
Yes, Mugshot.
That morning, Rohr was taken into custody, facing federal indictment for civil rights violations, abuse of power, obstruction of justice. David expected it, but what comes next?
Oh, it's a moment et never saw coming.
A DOJ official scribbles furiously, while a younger officer in the back fidgets, discomfort etched on his face.
David presse son relentle, tournant un other page.
"I'm submitting a sworn statement from Officer Eli Matz, Rohr's partner," he announces. He confirms witnessing multiple unlawful stops, racial profiling incidents, and admits to staying silent. Whitmore mutters, "This is turning into a witch hunt." David's gaze snaps to him, unyielding. "With all due respect, Chief, if you're Department Salem, I'm not lighting the fire, you are." The room tenses, a cough breaking the silence as the weight of his words sinks in. Then David drops a bombshell no one expects. "I'm not pressing personal charges against Rohr yet," he says, his voice steady, purposeful. "I don't want a settlement, hush money, or headlines that fade in a week. I want reform, public, enforceable, permanent reform." Judge Naomi Breener, a neutral observer, raises an eyebrow, intrigued. "You have a specific proposal?" she asks. David nods, his resolve unshakable. "Yes." 3 demands. First, mandatory annual training on racial profiling, constitutional procedure, and de-escalation. Second, a civilian oversight board with subpoena power. Third, immediate suspension of any officer under investigation for misconduct, pending full review. The board murmurs, a younger official whispering to the chair, the room buzzing with the audacity of his vision. David sweeps his gaze across them all. "I'm not here to shame," he says, his voice a clarion call. "I'm here to rebuild. But if the system won't change, I'll take every camera, every court, every voice I can find, and make this city a national case study in how power responds to injustice." He stands, gathering his papers, his voice steady, unyielding. "You have a choice. Savannah can be a symbol of change, or a warning." Flashbulbs explode as he exits, reporters swarming the corridor, their questions a barrage. "Mr. Langston, are you suing the department?
Running for office?
Is Rohr under federal investigation?" David walks through the noise, silent, his purpose louder than their shouts. Can you see the fire in his steps, the man who's just shaken the system to its core? That evening, back home, Alicia curls up beside him on the couch, her head against his chest, her eyes wide with awe. "You really said all that to their faces?" she asks, her voice tinged with pride.
David no, a fin smile breaking through.
"I bet they were so mad." "They were scared," he says, his smile sharpening. "That's better." Angela calls from the kitchen, her voice warm but cautionary. "There's a difference between making change and making enemies, you know." David looks toward her, his gaze steady. Sometimes they're the same people. Angela crosses the room, placing a steaming cup of tea before him, her hand squeezing his shoulder in silent support. The house falls quiet, but David's phone buzzes, a blocked number, no voicemail, just a chilling text. "You don't know what you've started.
Walk away before it gets worse."
He stares at the screen, his jaw tightening, then locks it without a word. They're watching, aren't they? But David Langston has no intention of backing down. A plain manila envelope arrives anonymously at his office late on a rainy Thursday. No return address, no signature, just his name in stark block letters. David Langston, personal.
The receptionist found it in the Dropbox. No courrier log, nothing.
David turns it over, the weight feeling off. Not junk but not legal documents either. In his office, Under the hum of fluorescent lights, he locks the door and opens it, his heart pounding. Inside, 6 pages, emails, memos, a spreadsheet, and a scan badge that stops him cold. His eyes narrow as he reads the top page, an email thread between Savannah PD's Internal Affairs and the DA's office, dated 6 months ago, subject, ROR flag pattern suppression. The words hit like a slap. DA Faulkner reviewed the footage.
Advise non pursuit.
Same as prior cases. He'll keep it off docket. No need to notify civilian complainants. David reads it twice, his jaw clenching. Can you feel the betrayal, the cover-up laid bare? The next page is a memo, internal use only, do not distribute, outlining an unofficial policy between SPD brass and the DA's office to manage optics on minority stops, coded language screaming complicity. Where resolution is impractical, prioritize internal mediation, avoid court escalation.
Translation. Bury the truth.
The spreadsheet lists 32 names, all black men, stopped by ROR under vague reasonable suspicion. Only 2 led to charges, both dropped, but the final column chills him, recommended action, over half say suppress and archive. The last page is a badge, not SPD but Chatham County DA's office, with a handwritten note in blue ink, ask Faulkner about the special list. You're not the first, but you might be the last. David freezes, his mind racing. Faulkner, smooth, charming Gerald Faulkner, a man he shared meals and small talk with, wasn't just complicit, he was the architect. Can you imagine the shock, the realization of such betrayal? That night, David meets Judge Breener in her private chambers. No press, no staff, just them, the air heavy with the weight of what he's uncovered. He lays the documents on her desk, one by one, each a piece of a damning puzzle. Her expression hardens as she reads, her voice low, grave. This is conspiracy, she says. David nods. And obstruction, possibly civil rights violations. Definitely that, she agrees, her eyes meeting his. Do you know what this could mean? I do, he says, resolute. But I'm not going to the DOJ yet, not until it's airtight. I need proof this special list exists. Breener exhales, her voice cautious. And how do you plan to get that? David's answer is quiet, unyielding. I'm going to ask the one who knows where it is. The next day, David stands outside District Attorney Gerald Faulkner's gated estate, a colonial mansion with white columns, trimmed hedges, and an American flag, a facade of justice. He's never been here, but he's seen it in campaign brochures, Faulkner posing as the law's guardian.
Oh, how the truth burns now.
David rings the bell, his heart steady but fierce. Faulkner answers, his smile wide, disarming.
David.
Didn't know you made house calls. I don't. David replies, his voice firm. This isn't business as usual. Faulkner's smile falters, unease creeping in.
You look serious.
I am. They sit in the study, unread books lining the walls, an unopened bourbon decanter on the table. David hands him the top 2 pages, his gaze unflinching. Faulkner's face stays still, but his hand clenches the paper's edge. Where did you get these?
They came to me.
David says, anonymously, but with purpose. Faulkner sets the pages down, his voice smooth, calculated. You know, Langston, sometimes it's better to let these things die quietly. You're smart, respected, with a future, don't tie it to something you can't control.
There it is, the mask sleeping, the charme d'un assertive. David de Sente flanche.
You created a shadow policy.
Protected à profiler. Buriez the truth to save your image. And now you want me to play along.
Faulkner's voice drops, a warning. Push this, and you'll tear this city apart. David leans in, his eyes blazing. Then maybe it needs to be torn.
Can you feel the defiance, the courage of a man ready to dismantle a corrupt system?
Can you feel the electric shock of truth in that quiet study, where the air grows thick with betrayal? A long silence stretches between David Langston and District Attorney Gerald Faulkner, the weight of their words hanging like a storm about to break. Then Faulkner drops a bombshell David never saw coming. There is a list, he admits, his voice low, almost confessional. David blinks, stunned, his heart pounding. Did he hear that right? Faulkner nods, his eyes steady, unapologetic. It's not on paper, not officially, but it exists, a running tally of people SPD flags as recurring subjects. They're not criminals, just types, certain neighborhoods, certain vehicles, certain last names.
People like you.
David's voice turns to ice, each word a shard of righteous anger. That's profiling. Faulkner meets his gaze, unflinching. That's politics. David's response is a blade, sharp and final.
Not anymore.
He stands, his resolve a towering force, and walks out the front door, leaving it ajar, no need to slam it. The walls of Savannah's justice system are about to tremble, aren't they?
The world explode before sunrise, a tidal wave of truth crashing over David's life.
He's barely slept an hour when alerts flood his phone, his laptop, the television, screaming headlines by 6:42 a.m. Savannah linked a secret watch list of black residents. Federal prosecutor refuses to back down. Can you imagine the chaos, the story blazing across MSNBC, CNN, even Fox News, though their skeptical spin, prosecutor claims R.A. Sile bias, but where's the proof? Tries to dim the fire. But the proof is undeniable, isn't it? David submitted it to DOJ oversight, the Inspector General, select members of Congress, each document a nail in the coffin of corruption. Judge Naomi Breener moves like lightning, requesting an emergency judicial review and securing federal witness protection for the anonymous whistleblower. Faulkner's office goes dark, no statements, no spin, just a silence that screams guilt louder than any confession. Can you hear it, that deafening quiet of a system caught in its own lies? By noon, David's front lawn is a circus, reporters wielding boom mics, news vans clogging the curb, drones buzzing like vultures with Wi-Fi. Angela pulls the blinds shut, shielding their home from the frenzy. Alicia, cross-legged on the couch, stares at the TV, her eyes wide, searching for her father's face. "Daddy," she gasps, "they're showing you." David steps behind her, his heart heavy as the screen flashes his press conference image, his hand mid-gesture, his expression fierce, then cuts to Faulkner's front door, then a side-by-side with Officer Jason Rohr's mugshot.
Yes, mugshot.
That morning, Rohr was taken into custody, facing federal indictment for civil rights violations, abuse of power, obstruction of justice. David expected it, but what comes next?
Oh, it's a moment et never saw coming.
A knock at the door startles them. Angela opens it cautiously, revealing a woman in her mid-50s, her afro-gray curls tucked under a sun hat, her faded church dress pressed, her lips tight with emotion. She clutches a photograph, her hands trembling. "Is this the Langston residence?" she asks.
Angela hesitat.
"Yes." "I won't take much time," the woman says softly. David appears behind her, and her eyes well up instantly. "I saw you on the news," she says, her voice breaking. "I had to thank you." She hands him the photo, old and faded, showing a young black man, maybe 19, smiling beside a beat-up pickup truck, dated 2019 in handwritten pen. "My son Dorian," she says, tears spilling. Rohr stopped him twice, said he fit the description. No charges, no explanation, just humiliation. After the second time, he quit night classes, said he didn't want to be target practice. David stares at the photo, his throat tightening. "He died last year," she continues, her voice a whisper of grief. "Not from violence, from fear. He shrank, slowly, quietly, like he didn't belong here anymore." David feels a punch to his chest, not guilt, not pride, but something ancient, a shared sorrow that binds them. "This isn't just your story, Mr. Langston," she whispers, her eyes pleading.
It's yours.
He takes her hand, holding it tightly, his voice a vow. "I won't let them bury him again." Can you feel the weight of that promise, the sacred duty to fight for Dorian and countless others? By evening, the crowd outside doubles, not just journalists now, but neighbors, strangers, veterans, students, parents, black, white, young, old, their signs a chorus of defiance, not one more. Profiling is not policy.
We stand with David.
A young man hands Alicia a poster, her father's face in bold black and white, the words justice looks like this blazing beneath. She smiles, her first in 2 days, her heart swelling with pride. Inside, Angela finds David in the kitchen, staring out the window, his face etched with exhaustion. "You haven't eaten all day," she says softly, concern in her voice. "I'm not hungry," he replies, his gaze distant. She doesn't push, instead wrapping her arms around his waist, her head resting on his shoulder. Do you ever regret it? She asks, her voice gentle.
What?
Becoming the face of all this. He's quiet, then speaks, his voice steady. I regret it had to happen at all. But no, I don't regret speaking. Angela looks up, her eyes searching his. You know it's not over, right? I know, he says, nodding. It'll get worse before it gets better, but now we're not alone. Oh, can you feel the strength in that unity, the power of a community rising? That night, a message arrives, not a threat, but a beacon. Senator Maya Hill, Judiciary Committee Chair, texts simply, saw your testimony.
You were right.
Want to bring you in for national hearings, civil rights reform.
This is bigger than Savannah. Call me.
David reads it twice, his heart racing, then gazes out the window, past the crowd, the flashlights, the cell phones, into the darkness. He's not just fighting for his name anymore, is he? He's fighting for Dorian, for every fit the description, every unreported stop, every soul who swallowed rage to survive. This time, the whole country's watching, and David's ready to lead the charge. 3 weeks later, David sits in a Senate hearing room in Washington, D.C., the weight of the moment surreal. He's walked these halls before, a quiet advisor, briefing senators, shaping policy from the shadows. Now he's center stage on camera under oath, not as a policy voice, but a witness to a system's failure. The gold Senate seal looms behind him, rows of press pack the back, senators line the dais with scribbling aides, C-SPAN's red light glowing, America's watching. Senator Maya Hill, poised at the center, leans into her microphone, her voice steady. Mr. Langston, thank you for being here. You've submitted documentation about an unofficial list between Savannah law enforcement and the Chatham County DA's office, disproportionately targeting black citizens without probable cause. Is that correct? David adjusts the mic, his voice clear, unwavering. That's correct, Senator. Do you have evidence this practice extended beyond the local DA's office? Hill asks. David nods, reaching into his briefcase. This, he says, holding up a printed PDF, is an email from the National Association of District Attorneys, March 2022, referencing a predictive suspect monitoring program across 7 states, including Georgia. He hands it to a clerk, who delivers it to the panel, the room stirring with anticipation. It uses historical arrest data to flag recurring attention subjects. David continues, his voice rising. But the data's tainted. Over 75% of flagged individuals are black or Hispanic, despite being less than 40% of those counties' populations.
Senator Hilles expression d'Arkansas.
You're saying this isn't just Savannah's problem? David's gaze is unflinching. It's systemic. Gasps ripple through the gallery, a senator shifting nervously. Can you feel the room quake with the truth? Hill leans forward, her voice sharp. You believe this data was knowingly used for unconstitutional stops?
Yes.
David says, unwavering. Worse, they built policy around it. They used bias to feed algorithms, then used algorithms to excuse bias. Senator William Pratt, a conservative Texan, clears his throat, his drawl skeptical. Mr. Langston, was this intentional or bureaucratic oversight gone too far? David's stare is steel. Senator, if I profile 30 black men and no one stops me, that's oversight. If I do it 30 more times and they build a spreadsheet to make it faster, that's policy. Pratt squirms, discomfort plain.
Ils pressent.
Have other jurisdictions confirmed such lists?
Yes.
David says. After my testimony went public, for prosecutors, one in Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, Arizona, sent encrypted messages. They were told to stand down, suppress, archive every time.
The room freeze, the truth a thunderclap.
Hill's voice softens, heavy with gravity. Mr. Langston, what would you call this?
David Dusnte flanche.
A slow-motion constitutional collapse. That night, the internet erupts. Clips from the hearing flood social media. Bias-fed algorithms profile black citizens. Nationwide DA offices implicated.
David Langston tears the system's mask off.
Cable news goes wild, some calling him a hero, others questioning his motives, but the facts are out, unstoppable. By midnight, 2 DA offices issue denials, a senator demands David's investigation, his inbox floods with hate mail, death threats, resignation calls. Yet he stands firm, doesn't he? In Savannah, the tide is turning, a grand jury convenes, Rohr's indictment looms, Faulkner resigns, citing family concerns. Judge Breener pushes DOJ reforms, and a mural appears overnight at the courthouse. A black man in a suit, hands raised, scales of justice cracked but unbroken, captioned, "Stand even when they won't see you." David sees it with Alicia, who tugs his hand. "They drew you, didn't they?" "No," he says softly, "they drew us." She squeezes his hand, her pride alight in the storm. That afternoon, Angela finds him in the garage, staring at the envelope that started it all. "I never told you," he says quietly, "but the whistleblower, I know who it is."
Angela essays Widen.
Who? He shows her the page, a name scribbled, R. Matz. "Officer Matz, the partner," she gasps. David nods. "He didn't just give me the folder, he gave me the match." "You think he came forward?" "I think." David says, he's been gathering evidence for a long time, and he has more.
Angela exhale, her voice steady.
"What now?" David's jaw sets, his eyes fierce. "We find him. We finish what we started." The courtroom awaits, standing room only, the district's largest chamber, usually for high-profile trials, now holding accountability's weight. David stands before the bar, no longer just a prosecutor or witness, but a petitioner in an unprecedented hearing to determine if Chatham County's justice system violated citizens' constitutional rights, systematically, knowingly, repeatedly.
Can you feel the gravity, the fight for a nation est saoul?
Can you feel the weight of history in that packed Savannah courtroom, where the air hums with the promise of justice? David Langston stands at the center, not alone, oh no. Behind him, a powerful chorus, DOJ officials, civil rights attorneys, local activists, and faces from the shadowy list, men profiled, followed, handcuffed, forgotten, their stories etched in pain. In the back corner, almost lost in the crowd, sits Eli Matz, no badge, no partner, just a worn-out expression and a folder clutched tightly, his presence a silent confession. His eyes meet David's, and for a fleeting moment, there's nothing between them but raw memory and the heavy consequence of choices made.
Can you sense
the tension, the unspoken reckoning hanging like a storm cloud? At the bench, Judge Evelyn Monroe, a black woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for slicing through lies, commands the room to attention, her composure a force of nature. "We are convened today under Emergency Motion 173B, brought forth by the Inspector General, supported by Mr. David Langston's evidence," she declares, her voice crisp, unyielding. "Mr. Langston, proceed." David steps forward, no notes, no need for them. His truth is his armor. "Your Honor, I stand here not just for myself, but for every soul whose dignity was stolen in the name of convenience," he begins, his voice steady, resonant. "I was arrested without cause, profiled, judged, paraded like a criminal before the courthouse I serve." He turns, gesturing to the gallery, his arm sweeping toward those silent witnesses. "But my story's just the headline."
Beneat it lies arrow, beyond one officer, one department, one city.
It's a pattern, a culture, a silent pact that screams, some lives are more suspicious than others.
Can you hear the fire in his word, the call to dismantle a broken system?
Judge Monroe nods, her gaze piercing. "You've submitted compelling evidence, Mr. Langston, but policy failure doesn't prove intent. Do you have direct proof of organized wrongdoing?"
David essays flick to the back, where Matt rises slowly, head turning, whisper rippling.
Each step he takes drags the weight of his past, his shame.
"Ido."
Matt says, his voice low but firm. "I'd like to testify." Monroe motions him forward, the clerk swearing him in as the courtroom holds its breath. "I was Officer Rohr's partner for 4 years. Matz begins, his voice trembling with the burden of truth. "I saw dozens of stops with no legal basis. I stayed silent, rationalized it, told myself it wasn't my place to question the system." He pauses, his eyes meeting David's, heavy with regret. "But then we stopped a man outside this courthouse, a man I admired, who defended me when I was too poor, too broken to speak for myself." Whispers erupt, a wave of shock. Can you feel the room reel from his confession? Matz opens his folder, handing it to the clerk, his hands unsteady. These are internal directives, not official, but emails, group texts, call logs. Officers were told to watch the usuals. Names, photos, addresses shared in a database we called the shadow docket.
David's chest tightens, the trousse à gouttes punch.
Mats presses on, his voice stronger now. Follner knew. He authorized data collection, added names himself. So did others, people high up. Monroe's eyebrow arches, her voice sharp. Do you have proof?
Matt no, resolute.
There's a flash drive in the folder, encrypted. It has everything. The courtroom erupts, reporters scribbling, phones buzzing, attorneys shifting, even federal agents blinking in disbelief. Monroe's gavel slams, restoring order. Thank you, Mr. Mats. Your testimony is entered into the record.
You may step down.
Mats doesn't return to his seat, he walks out, a man who's finally broken his silence. Oh, can you see the courage it took to stand and speak?
David steps back to center, his voice a clarion call.
I ask this court not just to review these documents but to issue immediate injunctions against any agency using discriminatory data algorithms. I demand a federal investigation, and I ask Your Honor on behalf of the Constitution, to name this what it is, a violation of our most sacred rights.
Monroe tac a dit Brice, her word deliberate, cutting.
This court finds sufficient cause to order a preliminary injunction, effective immediately. All named parties will face federal review, and the Chatham County DA's office is under special oversight. Gasps fill the room, applause starts, but Monroe's gavel slams again. This is not theater, she snaps.
This is reckoning.
David stands still, not triumphant, just resolute, his heart steady as reporters surge forward. He slips out a side door into Savannah's cold dusk, his breath visible in the air. Alicia waits, running to him, her arms wrapping tight. You did it, she whispers, her voice trembling with pride. David rests his chin on her head. No, he says softly, we're just getting started.
Can you feel the promise, the fight far from over?
3 months later, Savannah feels transformed, doesn't it? The courthouse is quieter, but its walls echo with change. The murals on its steps, preserved under plexiglass by city council order, proclaim stand even when they won't see you. A slogan painted on sidewalks, printed on t-shirts, whispered in classrooms. Officer roars convicted, Follner disbarred, federally indicted, the shadow docket dismantled, exposed to the nation. But the real shift isn't policy, it's people rising, refusing silence. David stands at a wooden podium outside the Savannah Civic Center, flanked by city leaders, reform advocates, community elders, no tie, no badge, just his name, his voice. A banner behind him reads the Langston Bill, a new code of justice. A unanimous state legislature victory mandating civilian oversight, banning unchecked predictive policing, requiring body cameras, public data, whistleblower protections. Alicia stands in the front row, clutching her civics essay about her father, her eyes bright with pride. Angela watches, pride mingled with the exhaustion of battles unasked for. David's voice rings out, strong, sure. I didn't choose this moment, it chose me. I resented it, wanted my peace, my work, my family, not microphones, not courtrooms. He pauses, his gaze softening. But when you're forced to kneel before the system you serve, when your humanity's questioned before your name spoken, you see silence as complicity.
I won't be complici, never again.
Applause erupts, loud, steady, a wave of recognition. We changed something, not everything but something, he continues. Change isn't a finish line, it's a direction. I see veterans, teachers, kids here, people once ignored now leading. Real justice doesn't come from court orders, it comes from community, from those who say, never again, and mean it.
The crowd rises, cheering, clapping, tears falling. Quand you feel the unity, the hope?
The most powerful moment comes later, as the crowd thins. An older man, 80s, approaches, cane tapping the grass, his weathered skin and sharp eyes carrying decades of memory. You remind me of someone, he says, grinning.
David smile. Who is that?
Me 60 years ago, Selma, Alabama, the man replies. They said we'd never change anything, the system too big, us too small. But you proved what I always believed, justice moves slowly, but it moves when we push.
David essaye d'empan, his voice a whisper.
Thank you. No, the man says, thank you for carrying the fight. That night, on their porch, David sits with Alicia, who reads her essay aloud, her voice clear, proud. She reaches the final line, looks up.
Will the change last?
David gazes at the neighborhood, street lamps glowing gold. It'll last, he says, if we make it. She leans into him. We will.
Star blink above, soft, constant, and after everything, the night feels still. Not silent, just still, the calm after a storm, before a new dawn.
This story isn't just drama, it's a mirror. It screams that dignity should never be conditional, that no title, no service shields you from bias, reducing a life to a stereotype in seconds. But oh, it sings that silence isn't our only choice. Speaking up, though it costs, ripples into lasting change. For those in their 60s, 70s, and beyond, this hits home, doesn't it? We've marched, voted, spoken, grown weary, but this story shows change comes from wisdom, memory, from those who've lost and still stand tall. David's journey is more than justice, it's legacy, refusing to let the next generation think silence is safety. If this moves you, if it echoes your life or someone you know, don't let it end here. Like the video. Share it with someone needing hope. Subscribe for stories that challenge, inspire. Remember, justice isn't a moment, it's a movement, and it needs us all. David Langston's story pierces my heart with both anguish and awe. The injustice he faced, cuffed and humiliated outside his own courthouse, reduced to a stereotype despite his federal prosecutor status, is a gut-wrenching reminder of how deeply bias runs, stripping dignity in seconds. Can you feel the sting of that betrayal, knowing his years of service meant nothing to Officer Rohr's prejudice? Yet, David's response fills me with hope. His courage to stand, not just for himself but for every profiled soul, is a beacon in the darkness. The way he transformed personal pain into a movement, exposing the shadow docket, demanding reform, and inspiring a city, moves me to tears. Eli Matt's redemption, breaking his silence to reveal systemic rot, stirs a complex mix of frustration and admiration. His confession, though late, shows change is possible, doesn't it? The Langston Bill, murals, and Savannah's awakened spirit prove David's fight reshaped more than policy. It revived a community's soul. Alicia's pride, Angela's steadfast support, and the old man's nod to Selma tie this story to a timeless struggle, making my chest swell with gratitude for those who push justice forward. This isn't just a story, it's a call to reject silence, to build a legacy where no child fears their skin marks them as suspicious. I'm inspired, heartbroken, and resolved. David's courage demands we all stand, speak, and fight for a world where dignity is unconditional.